On.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming back to our second session of our course that we're doing in facilitating and empowering people with disabilities. Thank you for coming back to our second session. Last week, which was our first week, we'll just review a little bit about what we covered so that we can remember, because a week ago probably seems like a long time ago. So we talked about different learning styles. You may remember, or I'll check in a minute to see if you remember them. So there's 4 main learning styles. Dave, do you remember what one of them was?
Oh, I forgot, sorry.
Michelle? I'll give you a hint.
Visual?
Yep, visual. Does that give you a hint, Dave?
Oh, is it kinesthetic?
Yep,
Oh,
that's
yes.
a good one.
Yes.
Auditory?
And auditory, yeah. So we're all different in how we prefer to learn and how we prefer to be taught. Some of us learn better when we see things, so that's your visual. Some of us learn better when we're actually asked to do things, and then it sinks in, and that's your kinesthetic. And then other people learn best when they're told things and they listen to it, and that's auditory. So last week we looked at that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, I think, today. We also talked about empowerment, and the feeling of being empowered. And also we talked about the feeling of being unempowered, and what a negative feeling that is, and how it makes us feel bad, and it makes us feel like we don't know very much, which then really takes down our confidence levels and things like that. We talked about that. We also discussed ours and the general society's values and attitudes towards people with disabilities. And we watched a video about sign language. And if you recall, we watched a video about sign language, basic sign language, which can help you when you're working with people with disabilities. And I've also brought a book in that you may like to look at during the break. It's called Getting Started with Keyword Signing. And I've also got some charts as well, which show some basic sign language. So that's what we did last week. This week, we are going to further develop our attitudes and our approaches when working with people with disabilities and facilitating empowerment. Now, last week I did an introduction to everything, and but I want to add a few more things, because last week was just a really introductory thing. So I wanted to add a couple of things. One of them is why I've gone into this area of work. I was in another industry of work for many years, and retired from that business, and I had planned to retire. But I found after 8 years of helping to raise the grandkids and other things that I really was ready for more, and I wanted to find something that was purposeful for me, something that meant something, which real estate doesn't. I have raised a son who's 41, who has an intellectual disability from a genetic disorder, and I've seen and experienced, obviously, the life of somebody with a disability, and it's pretty tough. The world is not really geared up very well for being inclusive for people with disabilities. They say they are, but people really aren't. So, but we have worked very well with him over his life, and he's having a wonderful life, and he's living a very, what I would call, normal life. He's married and has a child, all that kind of stuff, and has a great life. So I looked around at other people who haven't had the support that my son has had, and many of them are living atrocious lives. They really are, in institutions, just all sorts of stuff. And so that's why I decided I wanted something purposeful. I thought, I've got some experience in that area, and so I went back and did a TAFE course in supporting people in an individualized manner with disabilities, and I've been working as an advocate for people with disabilities. I've worked with a lady that was nonverbal, and I worked doing something called supported decision making, which we are all going to learn about today, and we're actually going to participate in that activity. So that's been really interesting. So I'm now wanting to work as a trainer in the area of, in the sector of disabilities. And that can be, there's lots of different areas when you think about it, because there's the people themselves who have the disabilities. And I'm mainly talking intellectual, because physical disabilities are a totally different thing, and they're mentally, they're just standard or regular, normal. But people with intellectual disability look at things differently, they absorb things differently, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's specific to them. So when I say working in disabilities, that's more what I'm meaning. So yeah, so what we're going to be learning about today, I know we touched on some things last week, but we're now in our second week of our course, which is called Facilitating and Empowering People with a Disability, and that's what it's all about. So I just wanted to give you guys a bit of a personal aspect of my life so that you know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And what you'll find is that most people that are working in this industry are passionate about it, and that's why they're there. So that's right. So I was saying, you could be training with this topic that we're learning. You guys could be training people with disabilities in all sorts of stuff that they need to learn about. You could also be training the parents, maybe of parents that have new children, that have young children with disabilities, and they really don't know what to do, and they're very worried about how they do things as a child is growing up. And you could also be training industry. You could be out there training employers how to make a work environment, how to make a workplace inclusive and welcoming to people with disabilities. Because when you think about it, our society is focusing a lot on diversity, and we talk a lot about diversity in Australia. And usually people think that means culturally diverse, but it also means people that are different, and people with disabilities are different. So it's part of that whole thing. So yeah, so that's sort of what we're going to be doing. Now, last week, firstly, I'm going to give you some handouts. And I've got some handouts that are linked together with other ones. So I've got, there's a few pages here, and they're relevant to some of the different things we're going to do today. So I wanted to give you something you could actually take away with you to remember and to use in future.
Thank you.
The first page is terminology, which we will go over in a minute in more detail. The second one is the historic models of care for people with disabilities in Australia. There's certain ways that have gone along with trends, social trends. And then there's another page on reflecting on how you could further develop your attitudes and approaches when working with people with disabilities to facilitate their empowerment. And we talk about how to communicate and all sorts of different things like that. So, and then the last page is indicators or signs of possible abuse or neglect with people with disabilities. So while we're going along today in the two sessions, or this week and next week, these will be relevant to you to refer to. Okay. Last week when we finished, I gave you guys some homework. As you'll remember, we read chapter 1 of our textbook, and we also had an activity. It was to work with a partner to go over the essays written during the week. Now your essay was, let me just have a look at what your essay was. Reflect on how you could further develop your attitudes and approaches when working with people with a disability to facilitate empowerment. And you wrote a one-page essay on that. So what I'm wanting you to do now is to just work with your partner. I don't need to see the essay. I just wanted you to reflect on it. And I'd now like you to chat with your partner on what you wrote in your essay, and see how the difference is between yourself and your partner. Now, because I'm doing this as a training exercise for my TAFE course, I know you guys haven't actually written an essay. So in the handouts, there's one of the sheets there that I thought you could use for this exercise. And it is, let's see, it's just really to come up with some ideas and discuss it. It's when you are working with a client with disabilities, how could you treat, how to treat them, okay? And that would be kind of topics that you would have written about in your essay. How can you better encourage yourself and improve maybe on some of your attitudes, and maybe how you work with people with disabilities. Maybe they might come into your workplace, you might be specifically working in a place with people with disabilities, so you need to think about these types of things. So yeah, if you could just break into pairs, and you've got the list there, and I'm just going to give you a few minutes to talk about what you would have written in an essay regarding these topics. They're topics such as dignity, respect, acceptance, a sense of belonging and inclusivity, remaining open to identify and enjoy what they have to offer as a person. Sure, they might have a disability, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they're a person with lots of things to give, lots of things to offer. So you need to remain open to that. Provide opportunities for them to develop and display their capabilities. Encourage active citizenship for them. Be enthusiastic when you're working with them, engaged, empathetic, and perceptive. Don't try to do all the talking. It's okay to have quiet time. So most people with an intellectual disability take longer to process. They take longer to process what you're saying to them. They take longer to process what's going on around them, and they take a lot longer to process how they're going to respond to what you've asked. So you don't need to fill the time when you're with them. You can just sit, and they will speak, or they will use body language to show you. So be enthusiastic and don't do all the talking. Let them express their thoughts. Another thing is, speak directly to them, not to their carer or whoever's with them, not their mum. Oh, do you think he wants a piece of cake? You don't do that. What would you do, Gay? What would you do?
Talk directly to them, because I think you have to build up respect between the two of you in friendship.
That's right.
That's what it's all about.
Yes.
Is that just because that person has a disability doesn't mean to say they're deaf or blind or
that's right.
and are not intelligent, because most of them are intelligent.
That's right.
And it's just having a rapport with them.
Yeah, and giving them the time
Yes.
to make their answers.
As you would, maybe if it was a child, to a certain degree, then you adjust.
You give some
Yes.
allowances.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's right.
And they have to learn to trust you as well,
That's
Yes.
which is a big thing.
Yeah,
If
and
they
if
don't
you're not
trust you,
if you're
they
not
won't-
making eye
Yes.
contact with
Yes.
them and asking them a question, how can they figure out if they like you or not? You're just talking to
Yes.
mum. Well,
Yeah.
everyone talks to mum. That's a bit boring,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Make eye
Treating them
contact.
as a person.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So can you just work as a pair and as partners, and just talk about what maybe for yourself personally, what could you do that might help you to understand more, and to be maybe a bit more comfortable with working or speaking with people with disabilities. So I'll just give you guys 5 minutes to have that discussion.
Okay.
So how would you,
We can
anybody else?
ask them questions.
I dealt with the customer before.
Turn it around.
Yeah, she's a regular, she's quite young.
So,
But got that
yeah.
disability.
So ask them questions
Probably
and
intellectual
see what the
disability.
person would want to do, not
She was a bit loud.
not what you
but
think
but I
they
think
should
I
do.
understand where she's coming from.
Yeah.
It's the world, probably, it's for her
Exactly.
it's normal.
And be, yeah.
You know, I think, but of
Yeah,
course other
be-
customers
yeah.
may look at it
Totally
differently,
different.
but I think what I did was
Definitely
like,
the
I
names
had to
we talked about.
treat her the same.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly
the
the
same.
same thing.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I do understand what
And
you're
they
saying.
can't learn if you don't
But
provide
I think you have to
opportunities
be
for them to
more
develop.
patient and more
No, that's
accepting
right.
as well,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
because I want to have business, because I think
Um,
not
yeah,
because
That's
yeah,
a bit
it's
like
and
being
that's-
engaged,
advantage.
enthusiastic, engagement.
empathetic and
Yeah,
perceptive.
perceptive,
Yeah,
because,
yeah. And same with, like as you said with Nydia, like talking directly to Nydia rather
Yeah.
than to Bruce.
You know, because
Yeah,
I
that's
get
right.
Bruce to
And we do that
support
too.
her, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I am treating you.
yeah, that's
It's
it.
the same as
And
I'm
it-
Speak
treating
directly
anyone
to the
else.
person, yeah, as
Yeah.
I'm look, you
make
know,
eye contact
looking
with them,
in the
yeah,
eye,
yeah, always, that's very important.
And
and
the-
I'm
with
not
the person that's
talking
ill.
down to
Yeah.
you.
And the inclusivity is a big one. You know, like
It really is important.
Tanya's excluded herself
So
from
you have to
pretty much
acknowledge
from
that she's
Nydia,
there
you know
as
what I
well.
mean? Yeah.
It's a bit of a shame.
It is, it's a shame because, I mean, they're missing out on getting to know
How are you
another
guys going?
person.
Good.
Good, good.
Yes,
Week
yeah.
around?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, good. You've had some experiences
And
that you can
because
talk
we're
about with each other
open,
and
Yeah.
share.
Yes.
Oh,
we
that's
can
great.
enjoy what have to offer
Wonderful.
as a person. So
Yeah.
last night having that Thai food with them, because,
Learning their couple.
Yeah.
Acknowledging
yeah.
and-
So, and if we go to Thailand, at least, you know,
Yes, I think when
she
what I
knows the
did last time, I think
language. And,
I did
Yeah,
ask her what
no,
she
we're
wanted.
good.
How are you guys going with the
Yeah.
topic?
Yeah,
good.
good.
Yeah, you can
good.
relate with some of the.
Bring out
Oh,
some
yeah.
important,
When-
yeah, important
when it comes
thoughts.
to payment,
Yeah.
and look at the carrots,
When it's about communicating with
It's
them.
about communicating,
Mm.
that's exactly right, that's
Mm.
exactly right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah.
And a lot of people.
Same as in treating. Think about your family, talk to and treat, so give some.
Same respect.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And I love Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you know, is that
Yeah, everything is.
Okay, well, just, I'll give you another minute to finish up.
Okay.
like that, don't they? They do, they sort of
Treat them.
think
Yeah. Dignity,
business
respect,
and so I
make eye contact, think about how you focus on, not in a hurry,
Sure.
yeah,
yeah.
having
It
the
is.
time to stop and
Well,
talk.
be
to the
engaged with
person.
them.
Yeah.
Engaged and,
Exactly.
well, always important, eye contact.
Yeah, not finding.
Be able to engage with them and make them feel like they're being listened to.
Mm. Maintain a sense of humour, that's a big one too.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask that everybody, that we just get a little bit of idea of what you guys, what the different groups, found when they were talking, and, just see what maybe a couple of your main points were. Okay, and Dave, what about you for an example? What do you think was the main things that came out of what you discussed and the experiences that you've had?
I think acknowledging that person,
Yeah,
that they're there,
that's right.
you know, and then because I know a while ago I had a customer who has a disability as well, intellectually.
Yeah.
When she came to the cabinet, she wanted to order, then of course her carrot was there,
Yes,
but I think my staff and I, we actually came over just explaining what that product is.
yeah, good.
And then yeah, so I think just have to acknowledge that she's there as a normal customer.
That's right.
Yeah, so I think it's
That's
quite
right.
important.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
Very good, yeah.
And eye contact were both saying it's really important to
Mm,
directly at them in their eyes and
Yeah.
let them know that you acknowledge them,
yeah,
and understand what it is.
very good.
And,
Give them the time of day like you would
Yes.
anybody else,
Yes.
that's right. What about you guys? How did you
Yeah.
find things?
The first three, dignity, respect and acceptance, you know,
Yeah.
says a lot about it, and
It does.
some points there would be enthusiastic and listen to them, stay engaged,
Stay
don't
engaged.
look over them like you're not listening,
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Because the way they engage with you might be different than other people.
Yeah.
They might talk in a way that's kind of hard to understand, they might use odd body language, but it's important that you take all that on board.
Maintain that
and-
eye contact
Yeah,
as well, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Very good. Thanks for that, guys. All right, we're just going to talk now about the terminology. So you should all have a terminology sheet. And we're just going to briefly go through them because it's important that we all are on the same page. I think often terms can get bantered around and they can actually have different meanings. So I'm just going to go through it briefly, and then on some of them I'll ask you guys for some input and examples. But some of it's very straightforward. So just starting at the top, disability, a physical or mental condition that limits a person's movements, senses, or activities in their life. PWD means people with disabilities, so you'll often see this in writing because it's a lot of words to write the whole thing out. So a shortened version is often PWD, people with disabilities. Duty of care. Just without even looking at the definition, Michelle, what do you think duty of care would mean?
To ensure that you look after that person.
Yeah.
Within your scope of practice, of course, and make sure that you don't harm them or no harm comes to them.
That's exactly right, that no harm comes to them, that's exactly right. It's a moral or legal obligation to ensure the safety or well-being of others. So with like disability support workers have a duty of care to the people that they are supporting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, dignity of risk is an interesting one. It refers to the concept of affording a person with disability the right or the dignity to take reasonable risks, like everyone else takes. Okay?
I love dignity.
Yes.
I love it.
Just like other people take in life. If you don't allow this, it can suffocate personal growth, self-esteem, and the overall quality of someone's life. So, if you think about, Wayne, you think about, can you share with us, if you wouldn't mind, an example of when you took a risk? Any kind? Physical, whatever?
As a paramedic, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
We do. We take risks. We assume that danger is clear when we're entering a property.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, if we're not clearing it properly, we're assuming a risk that when somebody says they're coming through the door to see, when you're visiting someone's home, there's nobody on the other side with a gun or a weapon or something. And that's real life scenarios.
Yeah, that's right.
So they are all risks.
They are all risks.
Always taking a type of risk. You obviously think about it.
Yep. You're putting yourself in harm's way.
But you've got to
that's your job.
Get the job done. Yeah.
Exactly. What about anybody else? Any risks that you know that you take sometimes or have taken? Michelle?
Just running an orange light.
Yeah, this is true.
I mean,
yeah.
or the fact that a light has changed to green, but you don't know. I hesitate before I take off in case someone runs that red light.
Yeah, you never know.
You don't know.
Being on the road is a risk, isn't it?
It is.
Crossing the street is a risk.
Yes.
Going to a restaurant and eating, when you saw that other picture, with a piece of glass in it.
Yeah.
I mean, life is a risk, right?
Mm.
And what happens often with people with disabilities is that people that love them so much, like their parents, they don't want anything to happen to them, and they're trying to protect them, and they wrap them in bubble wrap. And so they don't give them a chance to make any mistakes. And because they often can't execute something without somebody driving them there, or bringing them or giving them money or whatever, the people with an intellectual disability often don't get a chance to be independent enough to take a risk. And it frustrates them. It frustrates them because mom is always wrapping them up in bubble wrap. And it's very frustrating, and actually can lead to violent occurrences because they just want to get out there and live, and they see other people doing it, and they want to do it too. But it's a really hard one. You take dignity of care on duty of care on one arm, and you take dignity of risk, and it's like, okay, how much risk am I going to let them take? So this is something that's relevant all the time in this industry, and it's something that most people don't know anything about. When you say dignity of risk, they're like, huh? Empowerment. Empowerment is giving or allowing someone the power to make a decision or do something, not taking control over that person. So giving somebody the chance to make their own decisions, basically. Okay, this is something that we're going to work on today. Decision making. Decision making is a huge thing, and we're going to talk about that later today too, but I wanted to cover the wording with you first. So, substituted decision making. This is when somebody other than the actual person makes important decisions of life for that other person. So Gay, for example, you make all of Dave's decisions, right? Okay. So, so he's not making them anymore. You're the one that's telling him where to live, what clothes to wear today, what to eat, when to go out. So that's what you call substituted decision making. Another option, which is a much more positive option and is in line more with how society is working now, is called supported decision making. This is when a person with a disability gets support from other people that know them and like them, and that want things to be good for them. They get support from them to make or act on their decisions. It gives them choice, it gives them some control, meaning that their decisions and their choices and what they want, their perspectives, are being heard and respected. This is a basic human right, and it's the foundation of self-direction and determination. Now, you might think, like, I had experience working with a lady who was nonverbal, and we were working on supported decision making, and people would say to me, well, how does she make a decision if she can't speak? Well, there's lots of ways that we show our feelings and our preferences. If she doesn't want something, she'll go like that. Or if she wants something, she'll be excited about it. And there's all sorts of activities. I'll just show you. There's all sorts of signage, without it being sign language, that you can use with people who are nonverbal. So you have such a sign like this, and they're used to these. Yes, no, I don't know, I want something else. And they'll point to those. If you overwork them, they'll point to this one. What's that one say?
Need a break.
Need a break. They know that means need a break.
So do you have to have this all on
Yeah,
all
you
the
take
time?
it with you.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so you have a whole folder of them. And there's also, I didn't bring it today because they're really noisy, there's also buttons that you can, yes, no, maybe, I don't know. And they can push them and it will actually say the words. And they know exactly which ones are for which, and they'll push those. So there's lots of ways that people can show their feelings and show their wants and needs without being verbal. And so supported decision making, you are taking all of that into account. Yeah. And usually there's a small group that works with them, a little network group that works with them to do that, not just one person. Okay, and then there's different approaches. So there's the rights-based approach. That's the human right model. It's based on the human right principles. It's recognized that disability is a natural part of human diversity, as I was saying earlier, that must be respected and supported in its all forms. People with disabilities have the same rights as everyone else in society. So they have a right to go out and buy some junk food, right? Just like you have the right to go out and buy some junk food. But other people are always telling them, no, Johnny, don't buy that, you know. And people will then not give them money to go buy the ice cream. So that's not really fair. So, you know, rights-based means human rights, everybody's got the same rights. So that's that one. Person-centered approach is where you put the person actually in the middle of whatever you're doing and you work completely around that. So they are in the middle, and everything else that you're making decisions about or whatever are going to be focused on that person rather than what it should be or whatever. And then the other one is called strengths-based approach. This is where you actually kind of study that person and you identify what their strengths are. So even though they might have disabilities, intellectual disability, they might be really good at identifying numbers, or they might be really good at putting things together, whatever. They might be really good at lots of things. And so you identify those things, and that's what you focus on. You focus on that instead of the deficits. So that's what strengths-based is. Active listening. Active listening, I mean, I think we all know about this in that it's social listening, where you show the person that you are actively engaged, you're focused, you're not like being distracted by, you know, How many of us have been telling somebody what we thought was a really important thing, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, look at that dog over there.
Yes.
And you're like, what? Really? You know, it's really frustrating, and probably you won't tell them anything again that's really important in your life, because it shows that they really don't care much. So being an active listener is really, really important. Nodding your head, leaning forward in your seat, showing them that you're concentrating on what they are telling you. Active support is similar. It's a person-centered approach to providing direct support to ensure that people with even the most significant disabilities have ongoing daily support to be engaged in a variety of life activities and opportunities of their choice. So active support. In other words, you're not just gonna sit back, yeah, I'm their support worker, but we're not doing anything today. I've got homework to do, so I'm gonna do this, and I'm just gonna let him play on his device all day. You know, that's just not on. When you're a support worker, that you're being paid to do what is needed for that person or what they want to do. Active citizenship is a really important one. It means taking part in society, in all the different aspects of society. Education, entertainment, what else do we do? Go to classes, we go to movies, we vote, we can choose to have friends over, we can go to the community center, we can, you know, all the different things. Taking part in everything and being allowed to fit into the community and play an integral role within it. So, in making choices and having some control. Social justice. This is a term, this is the justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privilege within a society, including the person with a disability. And unfortunately, they have very little access really to social justice. You've heard on the news about some of the pay scales that people are paid?
Yeah.
Yep, no, they're getting paid, they were getting paid like, 40 cents an hour or stuff like that. And employers employing people, just thinking they're doing them a favor by employing them, paying them 40 cents an hour. In the meantime, they're packing all the bags for the Royal Show, they're gonna be sold for $50.
Sheltered workshop.
Sheltered workshop, that's right. So a person with a disability can't go out and buy a house. They're never gonna have a job that's gonna pay well enough. They can't go out and buy a boat. They can't probably go out and buy a car unless their parents help. And that's generally what happens. But, so when you look at social justice in society and the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privilege, they are so far behind that it's not even, it's just totally ridiculous. Capacity building is really important. With the NDIS, we've all heard now about the NDIS, the National
Disability Insurance
Scheme. I know it well. I just always say the NDIS. They're very much focusing on this, and it's been fantastic, the NDIS. Capacity building. So a lot of the funding that people get is to help with capacity building. And you have to actually write down your goals, you've got to write down what you're wanting to achieve, what capacity you're wanting to achieve, and then they provide funding for that. Advocacy in the disability sector, it is acting, speaking, or writing to promote, protect, and defend the human rights of people with disabilities. So it's a really important role that advocates play. Self-determination, 3 main features: participating in decision making, free, and they have prior and informed consent. Self-determination is deciding one's own path in life. Social role valorization. Dave, how do you feel sometimes in society? What makes you feel like you've got a place in society? And it makes you feel good.
I think if I know what I'm doing,
Hey?
if I know what I'm doing as well, and I just have that self-confidence. So that's,
No, I kind of mean
what do you mean?
like being a baker, being employed in something you respect, maybe being a dad. That's more what I mean.
Okay.
It gives you a feeling of that you're an important guy. So that's called social role valorization. in the value, it's the value that our society associates with different things, with different positions that you're in, like, oh, I'm a principal at a school, well, that's considered to be, high, pretty high valorization. But it doesn't have to be within the class system at all. Like I was saying, being a father, once you've got your own kids, all of a sudden you're really important. You are their father, and that makes you really important. Or your job, or you've got your own shop, or whatever. But again, this is something that is often out of reach for the person with a disability. And then we just have abuse and neglect, and we all pretty much know what those are. So I just wanted to talk about the terminology there. Okay. All right. Let's keep that. All right, I'm going to get the whiteboard out, and we're going to do a bit of brainstorming. Does everybody know what brainstorming is? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to come up with some ideas, and I'll write them on the board, or you can write them on the board. And we are going to talk about positive values and attitudes and how that impacts people with disabilities. So, society's values and attitudes towards the human rights of people with disabilities. How can positive values and attitudes impact the life of people with disabilities to make life easier and more inclusive in the community? How can society improve the way it treats people with disabilities, which is going to improve their lives? So I'll just take some of the things that you guys have to say. I think you probably touched on this when you were having your discussions. So what can people do? What can society do, and what can you do as an individual to help people to feel that their life is
Educate other people.
Very good one. Yeah. So educate community members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So they can include the person with a disability in the community.
Because I think personally that a lot of people out there have never had anything to do with a person with a disability, especially an intellectual disability.
Yeah.
So they really don't know. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't know how they're supposed to act. So they avoid them.
Yes.
That's my take on it.
Yeah.
So that's a really good one. Educate. That's great.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Michelle. What's another one? What else can we do as an individual or as society?
As a society, is make it more accessible for the person as well. So not all shops are accessible with disabilities.
I know.
Up here, it's not accessible for people with disabilities.
It's
I understand older buildings, it may not be
That's right.
able to, but we went out for dinner the other night, and there's a very old, it's in Fremantle, just here,
Yeah.
a very old type pub, and it's been around since the 18th century, but they built in a wheelchair access.
Yeah.
An electric wheelchair access. So that's exactly what I mean.
That's right.
Or,
Makes it fair
Yes.
and
Yeah.
equitable.
So
Yeah,
they
so
can
you
go
really
out for
can't use
dinner
it.
and enjoy it too.
you can't use an excuse of an old facility that
No.
we can't,
Yeah.
because they have, and it
That's
was
right.
quite
And they've
impressive.
made it work.
Yeah,
That's
it's really
exactly.
good.
So that means the person can actually get there. So if they get invited
Yeah.
out to dinner,
Yes.
they don't have to say to somebody, "Oh, sorry, I can't come because I can't get
It's
my
not.
wheelchair."
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
Yep.
They get really sick of saying that.
So acknowledge. Acknowledgement. So acknowledge the fact, the needs for things like access, or
Yeah.
acknowledge that they are actually a person with the same rights
Yes, that's right.
as
So
what we have.
we're back to human rights.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Dave, can you think of something that we could do to?
Yeah, you give that person a respect as well, like of who they are
Yeah.
as well, like
And
say-
how can you do that, Dave? How can you show somebody respect? Just give me a couple examples there. How would you actually show somebody respect?
by treating them the same as as the next person.
Yeah.
So as not we are isolating, or we're looking down at people with an intellectual or physical disability, but treating them the same as a normal
The
human
same.
being.
Yeah. The treating them the same and and that inclusivity.
And don't you think that it's once again, educating, because like children don't understand. You know, they see someone with a
They don't
disability
understand, no.
and acting a little bit different. But if they see by example how their parents are treating that person,
Absolutely.
then they grow up with the same respect and the same, you know, thought and care
Absolutely.
for that person.
Yeah, that's exactly true.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of things that we can do. I think that often people just don't think of it, because once they talk about these things, they go, oh yeah, wow, yeah, that's really important. But a lot of people just, you know, just haven't actually stopped to think about it. That's right. And also, you know, sometimes when we're out and about, we see people doing the wrong thing by people. No matter what it is, whether it be people with disabilities, whatever. I don't know if any of you have seen the ad on TV, but it's a really good ad, and it could be used for anything to do with abusing, even if it's not seriously abusing. I mean, just, you know, just kind of doing the wrong thing. But it's an ad for stopping violence towards women. And it's the boy, they're at a family barbecue, there's a boy there, and he's throwing this ball.
Yeah.
And there's this girl standing there, and she's, and you know, he's throwing it at her,
Yeah.
but right next to her in the building. And everybody just keeps putting up with it. And I remember when the first time I saw that, I thought, what the heck, you know? What's everybody doing pretending this isn't going on? And then finally, the parents, you know, one of them says, enough, enough, you know? And one parent says to the other parent something like, oh, well, we can't let him keep doing that. I mean, duh. And I thought that was a really, really effective ad.
Strong message.
Very strong
Yeah.
message.
Yeah.
And that could go, you know, that could be used in this type of area as well. Because it's, enough, you know, enough is enough. So
because there's too many bullies around.
there's too many bullies around.
Yeah.
And if somebody's, and you know, adults get better at hiding things, but young people aren't that good at hiding things. So if they see somebody different, they're going to joke about it. You know, if there's a kid with a limp, then all of a sudden the kids are laughing in the background and they're acting out the kid with a limp. You know, all that kind of stuff goes on, always has gone on. But that poor kid with the limp, I mean, how's he feel? You know, so I think, just like you said, it's sort of time to
Teaching your children to respect
educate everybody,
yeah, absolutely,
no matter what age.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
I also wanted to touch briefly on culture, diversity. So not only with disabilities, but just also just wanted to touch a little bit on culture. And I mean, we all know about culture. We all know that we have a diverse society. But I just wanted to share a little bit, maybe get you guys sharing too. If you had, for example, a new work colleague has joined your workplace, and maybe you're there, the person who's going to be doing the induction and that kind of thing, and then you're going to be going and introducing them to some of the other people. And you know, it's pretty obvious that they come from a different background, a non-English speaking background. Maybe they wear a turban or whatever, you know, it might be. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Like, you'd like to ask them a bit more about themselves so that you can assist in them, or find out if there's anything within the office that they might not feel real comfortable with, so that everyone can kind of work it out and make it fit for everybody. On the other hand, you feel like sometimes it's too personal to ask questions about their religion or their lifestyle or whatever it might be. But it is something that needs to, at some stage, needs to be touched on, because you do hear about, you know, for example, a work environment where everybody's going to go out for drinks afterwards, and this person, and guys and girls, for example, and the guy, you know, it's not in their culture to go out with other women that are not their wife. And so then there becomes this us-you thing. They stay behind and keep working, and everybody else goes out for drinks, and then this sort of thing starts happening. Gay, what do you think could be a good way to get around that? Or let's say if you're the person who's running the induction and you're going to talk to them and then you're going to introduce them to people, can you think of a way that you might broach that topic to help it be more comfortable?
It's a difficult one in
It
lots
is.
of ways because, as you said, you know, if I think we're all a bit shy, say if it's someone who's a Muslim, and we think because you know, we're in a hijab or that they're completely different from us, but they're actually not. And I think that you know, when you introduce someone, if you can even be a little bit light-hearted, not make a joke at that person's expense, but more just so that you let the rest of the office know, if you are, say, the head person in the office, that you are accepting of this person, and you expect them, just like they're treated with respect, that this new person is to be treated with respect as well.
That's right.
And you ask them that if there's anything that
That's
he
exactly
or
what I was going to
she
say.
Ask
doesn't
them.
really understand, then that please feel free to be able to help them, because we all want this new person to integrate
And to feel
with the
comfortable and
rest of
welcome.
us. Yes.
That's I was just going
And
to
this
say
is the
that.
type of office we are.
Yeah, that's right. So
So,
is there
yeah.
anything that, you know, I acknowledge
Yeah.
you're from
Yeah.
wherever you're from, and you're fairly new to Australia, how are you finding it, blah, blah, blah. Are there any things that make you feel a bit uncomfortable about the culture? Please feel free to, if you know, either let me know now or at any time. Just come and, I've got an open door. Come and let me know. Because we do things.
On the other hand,
I've been overseas many a times, and a way around that is show interest in their culture and share cultures.
Oh, yeah, that's
So we
good one.
we match cultures together and that's
celebrate
a good
it.
access into,
It is.
you know, this is what we do, how do you do
Absolutely.
it? And they- and that teaches them and teaches you as well.
Absolutely.
So it's a double-edged weapon of
I think that's a really good idea.
And travel actually opens your mind,
Yes,
because you might
it
be
does.
critical of other people until you travel or you live and work in somebody else's back. You know, like my husband was working in KL. Well, we had you know, different cultures there, and it's treating them with respect, because they've accepted you into their society, not the other way around. So,
Yes, that's right, when you're there.
so you behave in the manner that is culturally respectable
In that
towards
country.
them,
Yeah,
letting
exactly.
them know that you care about their culture.
Yeah, I think
And
it's
as
just,
people.
you know, a lot of it comes back down to communication again.
Yeah.
And just doing whatever needs to be done in a light, like you said, in a lightish way. Just to make sure that people know that they can come and talk to somebody if they find something, if they feel awkward because of blah blah or whatever, just so that you've got an open door policy on that. That's exactly right. Okay, well, we've actually filled up our session today, believe it or not. That went very fast. So just to review what we've covered today, we've looked at attitudes and approaches to working with people with disabilities and wanting to facilitate empowerment. We've gone over some of the main terminology. We've identified some breaches of human rights and how we could possibly improve that. And we've discussed diverse cultures, not only with people with disabilities, but various different cultures. You guys have really participated great, and I thank you very much for all of your input today. And I can see that you're right on the mark with understanding what we're talking about. And I appreciate that you're letting everybody, that you're sharing it with everybody. I really appreciate that. So next week, we're going to explore some of the terms that we mentioned today. We're going to explore them further in our next session next week, particularly person-centered approach and supported decision-making. We're also going to do some role playing, so that's going to be fun. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming today, and we'll see you next week,
Okay.
same time, same place.
Yeah.
All right, and your
Thank you.
homework, oh, wait a minute, you got homework, right?
Ah.
Okay.
Homework.
You got homework. You need to read chapter 2 of the textbook, and I want you to write out and reflect on indicators of possible abuse or neglect
Mm.
that you have witnessed in the community or heard about towards people with disabilities. And think about how this should be dealt with. All right?
Mm.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm.